it seems to me also very uh, worked out and structured
Yes.
to get that effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to do it. It's kind of cheating.
Maybe paradoxical.
Yeah.
It's a better word than cheating. I don't know. But you can call it cheating if you want.
Good evening, everybody. It's so wonderful to see a full room tonight. Thank you all for being here. If I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you before, my name is Eric Mitchell. I'm the Audrey Geisel University librarian, and it's a real honor to host you all and, of course, our amazing guests here tonight. We're here tonight to celebrate a very special addition to our library's collection, the recently gifted artwork of DeLoss McGraw. We're honored not only to share these works with our community, but to welcome DeLoss here with us tonight, along with noted art critic Bob Pincus, for what I know will be a thoughtful and engaging conversation. You know, we love to host events like this because it highlights how much research libraries contribute to our community. I was sharing earlier how exciting it is to see students stop in the gallery just to check out the artwork. They don't necessarily know, they didn't come to see that, they came to do their studies, but it's wonderful to see them engage with our collections and become inspired by them. And that's just one part of what our special collections and archives help us accomplish by inspiring students with creativity, helping them connect with materials that were created hundreds of years ago, materials they never even thought existed before they came to UC San Diego. You know, the gift of artwork by DeLoss reflects that mission beautifully. His work brings together visual imagination, intellectual curiosity, and a deep engagement with the human experience, qualities that belong very naturally in our university environment. Now, of course, collections like this don't just appear on their own. They're built over time through dedication, expertise, and stewardship, and that brings me to someone whose contributions to this library are truly extraordinary. It's my pleasure to recognize and introduce our Director of Special Collections and Archives, Linda Clausen, who will say a few words. Round of applause for Linda. Some of you may know Linda's been in the library a little while. Okay. And her leadership has helped shape not only the collections, but the culture of care, scholarship, and accessibility that defines them. Literally generations of students, researchers, and faculty have benefited from her vision and her work.
As Eric said, it's my privilege and pleasure to develop collections around selected areas that support research and instruction for the UCSD academic community and the international body of scholars. Ideally, special collections libraries are carefully constructed physical and intellectual structures, paying attention and service to the institutions they serve. But thinking about tonight's event and how these materials and people all came together at UCSD made me think of Legos. How one adds building blocks over time to create a structure, to which even more blocks can be added. So the structures which make up special collections keep evolving and are ever under construction, much like this campus, I have to say. So, the first block in this particular structure was the acquisition of the Brighton Press archives in 1999. Brighton Press, as many of you know, was San Diego's splendid fine press that produced a number of publications over the years, all of which included original work by a variety of artists. One of the artists whose work was included in some of their publications was DeLoss McGraw, and that was our introduction to DeLoss. His colorful works illustrated many works of poetry that the press produced. The second block of this structure was added in 2003. when the library acquired DeLoss McGraw's archive. These materials included correspondence, sketches and drawings, his own writings, mock-ups of the many books he was working on, and a large cast paperwork, a big pink bear, which has graced the wall of our seminar room since it arrived. Additions to Dell's archives arrived in 2013, and you'll be able to see more of Dell's works tonight in special collections after this evening's particular event. So Bob Pincus's archives began to arrive in 2024 and officially became the third block of this structure in 2025. His archive sheds light on years of cultural and artistic events in San Diego and Southern California. Bob's long and close critical relationship with DeLoss McGraw was also of great collecting interest to us. So the final block in tonight's story of collection construction began in early February of 2025. DeLoss, who has a wonderful way of keeping in touch through little postcards or drawings, and he sends just every once in a while, things like this arrive in the mail, contacted me about a private collection in Arizona, the Stefan Janssen Foundation, that was going to desuccession its collection, or much of it, after the death of its principal. Their original works of art, including Dell's, would be offered to other interested and appropriate institutions at no cost. Not the usual circumstance we face in a library. So, following Dell's suggestion, of course, I telephoned the foundation and had a delightful conversation with the curator, Anne Sanchez. Yes, the foundation was making its works available to other institutions. She was thrilled to learn that we held Dell's archives and immediately suggested that UCSD should have the framed paintings of Midnight Carnival, which can be seen in the gallery exhibit. She also indicated that she'd send a list of other DeLoss paintings from which I could select for UCSD. Managing somewhat not to be too greedy, going through that list, I did select a dozen paintings for UCSD, the ones I thought would make the most sense in relation to our other materials. So now we have all the pieces in place of our structure, and why we're happily able to bring two of the important personal elements of our structure here tonight, Bob and Dell. So let me talk a little bit about them. Bob Pincus is an art critic, art educator, and arts writer. He served for 25 years as the art critic and books editor for the San Diego Union Tribune, after he had done the same for the Los Angeles Times. His seminal book on the artist Edward Kinholz, On a Scale That Competes with the World, was published by UC Press in 1990. Bob holds a PhD in art history and English from USC, where he also received an MA in American Studies. He currently teaches at Cal State Long Beach and the University of San Diego. A legendary exhibition curator and a contributor to numerous art publications and exhibition catalogs, Bob has also been an avid interpreter of Dell's work. The artist DeLoss McGraw hails from Oklahoma, and his interest in and love of art was established at a very early age. He left Oklahoma for Los Angeles, where he studied at the Otis Art Institute and received a degree from Cal State, and then an MFA from the storied Cranbrook Academy of Art in Michigan. After his service in Vietnam, Dell taught at Northern Kentucky, then at the University of San Diego in the late 1970s. In the 1980s, he was active in the Los Angeles art world, and that's when he, I believe, met Bob. Is that true? The dates?
It's not right.
Sort of about right. Okay. It was in the 1980s that Dell decided to devote himself full-time to the arts. He continues to paint, write, and create from his current home in South Carolina. So, gentlemen, if you would please take your seats. And if everyone else will join me in welcoming Bob Pincus and the Lost Murderer.
Yeah, actually, I'll start off with just saying a quick word about how I had written about DeLosse's work before I ever knew him, and actually didn't meet him until I came to San Diego as a critic and realized he was in San Diego, and then looked you up, and you were living in Golden Hill at the time.
Yeah.
And that's when we did our first interview together in 1985, I believe, 86, right around there. Who can remember 85, 86, It's a long time ago.
I know that the article you wrote referenced my house as rambling.
Is that true? Anyway, so all of that was very fortuitous. I would start with saying it was very fortuitous I was assigned a review. When I started out as a critic, I was writing at the LA Times, and I was the junior critic, of course, and so they would give me assignments, and they assigned me your show. So that was the first. That was a great stroke of luck, which started the whole thing rolling. So I thought maybe a place to start with all of this was maybe to talk about your evolution as an artist a little bit.
What?
Your evolution as an artist. And one question that I thought might be of interest to people is the idea that when did you know that poetry and fiction would play such a large role in your art?
You would have to know my mother.
I have a question about your mother too, coming up.
My mother was a lit teacher, and all of my life we were filled with Hemingway and Faulkner.
That's it?
Yeah.
And how did that make you encouraged to keep going with poetry and fiction if you only had Hemingway and Faulkner to work with?
My father was an architect, and my mother always said that I should be an artist because they were divorced, and because my dad was an architect, and I think she knew that I did not do well in math, so I wouldn't be an architect.
So, do I remember correctly that you would come out to visit your dad and you would see some art in Los Angeles? Is that possible?
Yes, I saw what was a huge influence on me was the Bonnard exhibition at the LA County. That was, and not long after that, I attended Otis, and I got to go to the Bonnard show every week. That was at Otis, and that stayed with me. Now, I did leave Otis I won't, for particular reasons. And I went to Cal State Long Beach. Mm-hmm. There was a man named Bob Everman, and he taught. It was new. Can you hear me? Yeah. What was new and of interest at that time was lithography. And a man named Bob Everman was teaching it at Long Beach State, and I went there. And why lithography was so important to me is that people had been teaching me painting, other painting teachers, and they taught it with the brushwork. And I worked off of the stone. So is this making sense?
Yeah.
So I had to make my things flat. And I was making this up. No one told me about it. And and lithography is planographic in that sense. And that's when I kept up painting that particular way.
Does that, what you're saying about lithography and what you learned there,
Yes.
how does that then segue into what your painting style became?
Oh, I think that it had a lot to do with it because it's so flat, and these were not small. These were large stones that you ground and you drew on it. And I thought that I have made lithographs at Tamarin and other places, but I'm not a craftsman. I was a painter, but it gave me the direction of not painting with the brush.
Mm.
Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's interesting because if we think now about some of the work that's out there, whether you looked at it or not yet, a lot of paintings, but prints also, because you talked about Brighton Press,
Right.
and how you returned to printmaking, but kind of bringing your painting style back to printmaking.
Yes. Yes.
And so the two seem very united to me in a way.
Yes. Thank you. Usually I don't talk about that because I confuse everyone. So,
Okay, well, we'll move on to another subject.
right.
And yeah, maybe. So I'm thinking about, I'm going to return to this literature subject again a little bit,
Yeah.
beyond Hemingway and Faulkner.
Right.
Um,
Oh, I don't know.
we have to go beyond Hemingway and
Yeah.
Faulkner. But when did the poetry come into it? Because that is so key in terms of the pieces with Snodgrass and how
I
that
think that
relationship
that
came.
even started, I could be wrong, but I think that even started in high school. I can remember my senior year. I went to state competition, and
Something funny.
it was they were handing out the awards, and I won in English literature. I won third place, and my mother fell out of the chair.
She didn't know you wrote at all?
No. So, oh no, she knew that I was writing, but she didn't know that I had placed anything. And she said I had to drive her home with me and to Okima. And she asked me to tell her the questions. It was a question answer, and then you wrote an essay. And she said, after I finished, she said, your essay must have been brilliant because you missed all the questions. That's true. Her statement. So,
So let me talk for a minute about you and Mr. Snodgrass
yeah,
and how that came to be. Because if we follow the works out there on the Handsome exhibition, you were making pieces about his poetry before you ever met.
yes.
And were you sending him just images of the paintings? Or how did that conversation then come to be?
I sent him not a drawing, but I sent him a letter asking if I could use his poetry for my paintings. And
he didn't know
and he
you.
wrote back and said, you can do anything you want to, but spell my name right. That's true. So I I remember now, I was asked to be a guest artist at Cranbrook Academy.
Mhm.
And that's when I wrote Dee and I told him that they wanted me to make a print. And could I use a poem of his for that?
My sense of the work, if I may interject here as
Yeah.
a sort of critical comment, is that you started to sort of develop a bit of a persona for him in your art,
Yes.
even before you two got together.
Yeah, I think that's
And,
true.
and then you, here's where I am asking you because I don't really know. How did because you guys created kind of a character which is not the poet, not you,
Yeah.
but you called him WD,
Yeah.
and became kind of his own character in all that was sort of
Yeah.
in the paintings and the poems, right?
Right.
How did that come to be?
The way you just described it.
I described, yeah.
Yeah.
But did you guys just talk about it?
No.
Or it just happened?
No.
Or-
No, there was never any talk. I just would send him letters and drawings, sketches, and he would reply.
Mhm.
But we didn't use the telephone. No, I think that just turned out to be wise.
Mhm.
He would write and ask questions about particular ideas or that it appeared to be,
Mhm.
and but no,
Yeah. So now, to me, it seems like you developed a true collaboration.
correct.
It's not, and I never would call what you paint is illustrating a poem or vice versa.
But I loved his work.
Would you talk about that for a moment?
Oh,
What did you love about his
sure.
work?
I loved. It was so straightforward and honest, and I loved it. Wasn't that I liked it; it's that I loved it.
So if that's the case, do you feel like part of what you liked in him was the music of his language, the way he used words,
What
the music of his language?
the music of his language,
Yeah.
not music, but the music of his language. Yes, yes,
Yeah, I was, I was struck actually reading again the poems from WD's Midnight Carnival.
yes,
I reread those for, thinking about this evening. And of course, all those etchings, those colored etchings are on the wall, so you can look at them if you haven't yet. But I was reading you one passage from the first poem, which is about, and I just thought amazing use of words. I'll just read it was about Mr. Sun, is it that
Yeah.
how he puts it? Yeah. He says, the sun is a lion circling his cage, caught for you, brought for you on this wheeled stage, through fixed bars glaring, his wrath and his rage.
yes.
I mean, it's just beautiful use of language. And the thing is that what I've discovered rereading these things is that he is, this isn't any way to trivialize, he's very comic in his poetry, very funny, switches from vernacular to very formal language, back and forth. And I think that comic effect and I don't mean it as just comedy, but it can be very dark sometimes, but
Yes.
it always has that exuberance,
I-
which is in your work as well.
I had recently, around this time, remarried, and the woman I married said, "My God, everything you like is ironic," and I think that is so. Dee's the same way.
And so by that you mean never straightforwardly sincere, there's
Yes.
always irony in it?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So would that, sometimes one of the descriptors that's been attached to your work is whimsical.
Yes.
But irony doesn't quite seem to go with whimsy, does it? Or does it, in your opinion?
Well, I can understand how that word is used with my work, whimsy, right.
Yeah.
But I still think the word ironic is closer to it.
For both of you. So you were on the
Yes.
same wavelength, as it were.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Um, so
He would write or call even at times and say, "What do you mean by this?"
and did you think he was being ironic?
No.
I'm interested also in fairy tales,
And what?
or let's say nursery rhymes for a minute. here.
Okay.
You two seem to arrive at the idea of using nursery rhymes as a launching off point. Obviously, the death of Cock Robin,
Yes.
the house the poet built.
Yes.
How did that come to be as a launching off point for you
I
two?
did Cock Robin because it was, I wanted to work with that idea. And Cock Robin is the poem that introduces the child to death experience. And that's why I selected it. And, he enjoyed that. He goes through the whole animal kingdom.
Oh, yeah.
Who killed Cock Robin?
Yeah.
I, says the sparrow. I shot him with my tiny bow and arrow. And
And I notice he uses different animals than the
Yeah,
nursery rhyme
yeah.
as well. One of the other things I noticed also in rereading was the animals aren't quite as admirable in his poetry as they are in the nursery rhyme.
yeah,
Like they're all doing sort of noble things to help Cock Robin get buried and
Yeah,
honored.
yeah.
But he's saying they're trying to sort of escape. They don't want to be tied to his death.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I
Right.
guess there's the irony, right?
They're like us.
They're more human.
Yes.
Yeah, the animals in his poetry. Did you find was that hard to paint?
No,
Not at all.
no.
So how I mean, I think of the
Those ideas
Yeah.
come to me really quickly.
yeah. Now the WD character, not
Yeah.
WD Snodgrass,
Yeah,
in the paintings,
yeah.
seems to be a little bit tied into the idea of a sorcerer or wizard or something, because sometimes he's wearing or is it a dunce cap? What would you call
It's a dunce cap.
Okay,
Right,
nothing magical.
right.
Why a dunce cap? Just
Because he and we are a bit of a fool.
all of us.
We get it wrong.
Yeah, and we do probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would also say that I wanted to ask you about Alice.
Yeah.
There's only little bits of Alice in the show, but that book that you did, Alice
Yes.
Adventures Underground, of course, which has been illustrated by other people, but you
Yeah.
felt really compelled to paint that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about your identification with Alice?
Sure. It's kind of interesting. I don't know if you've seen it. HarperCollins published it, and I have to tell you that it did win Book of the Year, and the woman who was my editor, Simone Kaplan, did not want me to do Alice. But I said, I won't do anything unless I do Alice. I was just convinced, of the right of that for me. Alice had been important to me. And
Did you identify with Alice in some way that made it
I
important
think-
for you to do that book?
yeah, I think that that I didn't personally identify with her, but I admired the little child. And I think in a way, it's not so far from Snodgrass, who did all the poems on his daughter.
Now, yeah, I would recommend everybody just, at some point look that book up because it's beautifully done. And I wanted to ask you, do you feel that the way you did it was illustrating it, or was it, again, the same way you did with like Cock
No,
Robin?
I think that it was done, I think, the same way that the cock robin was.
Mm-hmm.
It emoted, can I say that?
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been in love with not the Alice character, but the Alice idea. The child, the adult child.
Mm-hmm. The child who has some wisdom.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
One of the things that he's done is he's done more series with Alice going other places, right?
Doing what?
You've done Alice going other places, like
Yeah.
Alice in Oklahoma.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So Alice lives on, she sort of
Yeah.
transcended the book, transcended the Lewis Carroll version of
Yeah.
Alice. Why did you continue, why did it endure? Why did it continue on for you? I mean, she must have a life then within your creative
yeah.
life beyond.
Brings in a few things, but I just wanted to paint her, and
Yeah.
some person calls you and they own a gallery and they want your work, or they think they do maybe, and so you work it out to do what you want to do. You know?
Yeah.
In Alice book is that there were all kinds of problems with the publisher, and Simone Kaplan, the editor, that I was told went down there every day fighting to get what we wanted our way. They wanted it a different way. I don't know what that was.
Do you think you'll continue to paint Alice?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I have to tell you just a little quick aside here that I remember when you had a show about Alice at the Cannon Gallery in Carlsbad, and you had done a table, right? You did a chairs and table,
Yeah.
the Tea Party.
Yeah.
And I went in to see the show, and there were kids there that day,
Yeah.
and they were all sitting around his table, and you can't forget the expressions on their face. Like, I get to sit on the rabbit chair at the table.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just have to think that would help bring literature to life for them,
Yeah.
really activated it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought maybe I'd segue a little bit into the idea about your style of paintings.
I think that one thing is this is hard to understand. I'm not sure that you'll know who this artist was, but I was in Germany and with a good friend of mine, he's German, and we drove to the University of Hamburg to meet him. You know who Wunderlich is? Wunderlich was his name.
Okay.
He was a printmaker, and we drove there, and he wasn't there. And they said he was in Paris or somewhere. And anyway, what was interesting is I went, or maybe I snuck, I went into his studio, and he was known and he was as this tremendous technician, and the studio was just a mess. And I realized that he didn't, in making lithography, he was so good at it. He used things as painting palettes, just as he would use them. And they were just all over the shop. And that was an inspiration for me, that I realized I had been schooled a different way in lithography, and which was good and right, but it was to be really technical and clean. And this was not it. He was using it like a painting,
So you had license.
like a
to do-
studio.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm saying that was a great,
It was a revelation.
yes, realization.
Now,
Correct.
did that mean you felt like
Yes.
it could be more expressive and messy, printmaking?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. As in like the house the poet built?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because you feel like there's a lot of spontaneity in the work, which is probably not spontaneous necessarily.
In the house the poet built.
Yeah. in the way it looks. But
Yeah, right. You're right. It was
Yeah.
more calculated.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I always was interested in how you made the calculated not look calculated.
Yeah, I tried to do that. Right.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah. Is that true of your paintings as well?
Well, I don't really separate them. The drawings, prints,
Okay.
and separate. It's all the same thing.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah. Because I think your work, if I may
Yeah.
use a description of it, is very expressive, and you could go as far as say it's expressionistic. But it seems to me also very worked out and structured
Yes.
to get that effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to do it. It's kind of cheating.
Maybe paradoxical.
Yeah,
It's a better
yeah.
word than cheating. I don't know. But you can call it cheating if you want. What do you feel like you're working on now that interests you? Would you like to say
Okay.
anything about that?
I have this idea that I'm just really in love with, and I've attempted to do some things, and I think that there's good in them, but it's not in a way that's going to lay out a large series for me, and that is this comes out of the Bible.
Yeah. in the Bible.
Eli
Mhm.
is an elderly man, and Samuel is like 2 or 3 years old, and I just love it. And he tells Samuel to go to bed, and then Samuel does, but he gets up and he says, "Here I am, Eli. You called me." And he said, "I didn't call you. Go back to bed." So he does, and this goes on in the Bible about 3 times, and he'll say, "Eli, here I am." And what's happening is Eli then realizes that it must be God that's calling Samuel. And
So-
then there is no more. Now, what I've done is Samuel's little, so I've made little bitty paintings. And they're little gouache and oil paintings. And I haven't exhibited them or shown them, but I'm just in love with this idea.
Well, again, you're back to the child.
What?
The child is the main,
Yeah,
feature of these paintings.
right.
You're thinking about him
Yes.
and what his life will become, or is at that moment in time as a child.
I don't know
You don't sure yet.
I don't know where it's going.
Okay.
I just love this early part of Samuel thinking that Eli is calling him.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you one more question.
Yeah,
Okay. And that is, I realize, reminded looking at the exhibition here, how Stefan Jansen was important.
yeah.
So, what does it mean to have a collector be that devoted to your work?
Yeah. I think he owned like 80 or 90 paintings of mine. How many do you have?
12.
12? Okay.
That's a pretty good percentage of them.
And, but it goes. I was showing with a gallery downtown Los Angeles, Adrian Samard, and no one sold anything ever. And then one day I got a phone call, and it was the gallery receptionist, and she said, "Del, a man came in today and bought all your paintings." And Stefan was a collector in Europe. He was European from Brussels, and he collected the art called Cobra, which meant, you might know it, which meant Copenhagen, Oslo, Brussels. And these were artists that used word and image. And he saw my work and thought it was Cobra.
Yeah. Well, he obviously identified with
Yeah,
it.
identified with that. And there's a painting there that is, I think, like the first painting that he bought early. And that's the one where it says the poet is frightened by his own thought.
That was the first one. Is that?
I think it's
Yeah.
it's close to it,
Uh-huh.
you know.
Yeah. And he never stopped acquiring your work.
No.
It sounds like.
No, he passed on, but he never. He even bought work of mine that through photographs.
Oh yeah.
Early work of mine, like I tried working in photography before, and I had some photographs, and I noticed those were bought in his collection.
So he wanted to see your work from sort of the whole evolution of it.
I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's
Yes.
what I'm seeing from that. And I think it's interesting because what it says to me about him as a collector is that he collected for the right reason, which
What?
is he collected for the right reason. He just collected what he loved.
Yes.
He didn't worry about what other
No, didn't.
collectors did or trends or whatever.
He said that I could. I wasn't the only one. There were other artists too, but that when he passed on, he left the word with Anne. She's his what?
Yeah, Linda and Sanchez.
Anne Sanchez, right? That that I could donate my work to any place I wanted to, but I could not receive any money from it.
Interesting. Maybe should we open it up to questions now? Yeah, people might have from anything I said or
I don't
anything
think
Delas said.
too many of them are asleep.
No, I don't think so. I think you've kept him awake. So would anybody like to have a question for the artist or me or both?
The biggest influence.
Biggest influence on your work? I'm assuming among artists, right? Yes.
from other artists.
Yeah.
Well, I think it'd be early on that artist Paul Wunderlich. People
you
can't
mention-
believe it when I tell them that.
Because the work doesn't look like your work.
No, I mean, he basically became a pornographer.
And that's not the work you were
But
interested in, huh?
he does these beautiful water washes,
Okay.
you know, and all of his work is lithography, and he really understands it, you know.
Uh-huh.
And but the interest that I took from it was in painting, and I mean, I never could paint those water. I never could make prints like his with the water washes. It's it's too difficult.
Tell us about the book Alice.
Yes?
I hadn't heard of that. Is that something you wrote?
No. To explain, it's the classic text, Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, although Alice's Adventures
Yeah.
in Wonderland is the
Right.
full time. And so you're just reading it with, instead of the original illustrations, which were by John Tenniel, you got his illustrations in it. But I would just sort of put the word illustrations in quotation since he's not literally illustrating it, but you're kind of, would you say, playing off of the text?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very colorful. No black and white illustrations.
No.
Yeah.
And it's
It's beautifully
also-
designed, by the way, and I'm going to interject here. Because Delas told me that the woman who designed the book, and I don't know her name, he'll tell me, it was the first book she ever designed.
That's
right?
correct.
And it's
She was a
beautifully
kid.
yeah, it was uncanny when I saw it.
Harper Collins did not really like me, so they didn't give me anyone really. I'm serious. Anyone good, and they thought
They didn't
thought
think she was good.
They thought she was bad, and her first designs were terrible in the book. And I said, "Don't try and please me. You just please yourself." And she did this beautiful design work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I can say this, if you want to buy the book, you can buy it on Abe's book
Yeah.
for about $10. You can buy it online.
How do you create art based on poetry? Do you read a poem and then think about what the poem means to you? Or is it just an image in the poem that you focus on, like one stanza? Or what's the process? I'm just curious.
Works both ways. It's whatever tugs at your heart. And it's like Eli and
Samuel,
Samuel.
getting to know the Bible now.
I just fell in love with that image. I think that's important. You know, that's what gets it across. Your passion about the idea.
Thank you all for being such a attentive audience. Really,
Yeah.
it's been great. And a pleasure to hear. I've learned new things.
Oh, he
being
didn't
here with you.
learn anything.
Yes, I did. I did. I really did. And so we can end it there. That's perfect.
Well, I'm greatly honored to be here.